This week's parashah is the most important parashah in the entire Torah. You may ask, why is this week's parashah the most important in the entire Torah? Well, let me tell you. Parashah Emor opens with some rules about Kohanim. We read about the details about what funerals Kohanim can and can't attend, who they can and can't marry, which Kohanim may and may not bring offerings, and some rules around the offerings themselves. Finally, we read about the various festivals throughout the year. But none of that is why this is the most important parashah in the Torah. The reason this is the most important parashah is because it reminds us of an aspect of the festivals that we've mostly forgotten about. This is not the first time in the Torah that we read about the holidays, and it won't be the last time. But there's something different about this time. This time, there's a particular emphasis that you don't see in the other occurrences. When we think about Jewish holidays, each one has a historical aspect and a theological aspect. Pesach, historically, is when we left Egypt. Theologically, it's when we became free to serve Hashem. Shavuot, historically, is when we arrived at Sinai. Theologically, it's when we received the Torah. Sukkot connects us to the history of the clouds of glory that protected us in the desert for 40 years, and theologically is the cap to the high holiday season. But there's another aspect of each holiday which has largely been ignored for 2,000 years. Every holiday has an agricultural aspect, a connection to the land. This is the emphasis we see in this week's parsha. Now, it's understandable that this aspect of the holiday has been largely ignored. Before the exile, after the destruction of the Second Temple, we were a land-based people. We were largely farmers. Agriculture was our central connection to the land of Israel. After the exile, that daily connection of working the land got put on hold, so the historical and theological aspects took over. I don't think it's by chance that when the sages decided what we would read for the holiday Maftir Aliyah, they didn't choose this version of the holidays, but chose one later in the Torah, which was less agriculturally focused. We read in this week's parsha about the Emor offering that we bring on the second day of Pesach. The Emor offering was largely barley. Why barley? Well, barley is the first crop to be harvested, so it's the only offering that could be brought at that time of year. On Shavuot, the offerings are more wheat-based. Wheat gets harvested about 7 weeks after barley. Same with grapes. The Talmud relates a story about a rabbi who really couldn't tolerate wine, and related how he would drink wine on Pesach and have a hangover all the way until Shavuot. So the question arises, why drink wine? Why not a grape juice? The Talmud talks in other places about how grape juice is acceptable for Kiddush. The answer is very simple and would have been obvious to our ancestors who lived on and worked the land. Grapes didn't grow until the fall, so it would be impossible to have grape juice on Pesach. You pick the grapes in the fall. The only way to preserve the juice for 6 months is to allow it to ferment. So by the time Pesach comes, you have wine. Being so distant today from the agricultural aspects of the holidays makes all this very hard to relate to, but would have been second nature 2,000 years ago. So what the Torah does is takes the historical, theological, and agricultural aspect and combines them into a multifaceted holiday that can speak to us in every generation. Okay, that's interesting, but why is that so interesting to make this the most important parsha in the entire Torah? Well, we're supposed to take the Torah we're reading and have read many times before and connect it to our current reality. Well, my current reality is that I'm in Israel this week and have spent time working on farms and engaging with the fruits of Israel. Agriculture, history, and theology are all mixed into one for me this week, and allows me to connect to this week's land-oriented parsha in a way I never have before. That's one reason why this is the most important parsha in the entire Torah, but the other reason is that the most important piece of Torah is whatever piece of Torah you have in front of you right now. Shabbat Shalom, and Am Yisroel Chai.